All right, if you want to resuscitate your body's creative processes, yes, you need to be actually drinking Inspire Africa coffee. It will do wonders for you this beautiful morning. My name is Rami Busuku. You're watching Morning at NTV. We do have Elena Kembabazi. She's the program manager, Right to Health at the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. We'd like to talk about the vaccinations that are largely centering around the teachers because government pegged the reopening of the schools onto the inoculation of the teachers in that regard. A very good morning, Elena Kembabazi. How are you doing this beautiful Thursday morning?
I'm doing really great. How are you? And it's good to be back.
All is well. How come this whole vaccination process started when the First Lady actually started advocating for the inoculation of the teachers? What do you make of all that is happening right now?
First of all, I think it's good that they are thinking through how to safely reopen schools, because we know that our kids are not learning at home, particularly kids from poor backgrounds where continued learning is just not been happening. Like they're not getting materials, they can't get the internet. And there's certain categories of kids, particularly girls, that seem to be safer while at school, unfortunately. So it's good they're thinking through safe reopening, because what happened last time was an absolute mess with the COVID cases and being hidden. Vaccinating teachers is one step towards that.
Yes.
And they have been clear about teachers being a priority group over time. I think the challenge that we keep seeing is things seem to be done ad hoc, because now it's only, I think yesterday, well, the First Lady has been saying, you know, we have to vaccinate teachers before schools can reopen. We even have to vaccinate kids, and we've been hearing it. But it's yesterday that we wake up and we learn, okay, they're going to be vaccinating in these schools in Kampala. We don't know, like, what is their, you know, are they going to do it up country as well? Is it only in Kampala? There's a way in which, in this country, when it comes to a lot of these things, it almost, they come and just throw something in. There should be a proper plan. We've known this for a while. We've known for a while. And we've been, you know, having people say, encouraging people to go for second doses. But they could have started this earlier. And that's my main issue here. And also because, too, it's not clear again. Kampala only, elsewhere, we need more details. And 3, making sure that we have enough vaccines. If you've gone for vaccination, you know the lines, the fighting, that I literally witnessed people fight. At some point, I witnessed healthcare workers had to lock us in a room to keep out crowds. That is how crazy it was. And the vaccination rollout, particularly after lockdown, has really been a mess. So you know, there are broader issues with how this exercise is being carried out, and I hope that we don't see them further here. You know, with schools, I hope teachers are not excluded. I hope that they're able to get their doses, and that the ministry can figure out how to really make this process better. People can't be fighting to get into halls to get vaccines. Healthcare workers not showing up when they're supposed to. Someone's entire day is killed, then they're not there today or the other. We've also had Sinovac vaccines, which for so long we've been saying, where are these vaccines? Why aren't we seeing them? Why can't they vaccinate teachers, particularly those who need new doses, who didn't get AstraZeneca? Then you later on heard they were going to only give them to corporates. And we began to say, but if you're saying all efforts should be put to make sure teachers get back into school, why would you prioritize corporates over teachers? So we have to see a lot more emphasis. The priority groups, the priority group. Yes. Sorry, Romy. I thought I had lost you there for a bit.
I'm still here.
Yes. And of course, the other thing that is on everyone's mind is you've been talking about vaccinating learners. When will that happen?
Indeed.
When will those vaccines come? You know, so we don't have a lot of details. I know that in the minister's last statement, she talked a bit about doses that we're going to get of different vaccines, starting from September, I think, with J&J and others like that. But again, in terms of seeing a very clear plan and with timelines to say by this time we will have hit this number of the population. And for teachers, by this time we will have completed vaccination of teachers, unless they just didn't want to show up. And therefore, by this time, hopefully schools will be open. we still don't see that. And Ugandans are very, very anxious about this.
Yes,
The
Ellen.
longer the issues are not clear, the more it erodes public trust. You saw that skepticism.
Indeed.
When they said, oh, we're going to vaccinate teachers and children, everyone said we will never open schools. You just want money. So they really have to be serious if they are going to do it. And the other thing that no one is talking about is, have you been engaging with the teachers?
Indeed.
Because there's been vaccine hesitancy. I was in the market yesterday and I was asking this lady, she's within the categories, why haven't you gone? She had said she'd go before the lockdown. She began telling me where I was, like 5 people died after vaccination. I said, what are you talking about? Did they get clothes? What happened? No, this person got this person got this. So there's pockets of people that are seeing this and are saying that people have died, the vaccine has killed them. Or we got a COVID. So there's a group of people that are still not being reached.
Indeed.
And to be very unfortunate if they are teachers especially who are supposed to handle kids. We don't believe in mandatory vaccination. We believe in encouraging them and making sure you give them a lot of information, like strongly encouraging them. I think it is in teachers' best interest and our children's best interest to get vaccinated. But the ministry has to reach them, and not in PR. It has to be a session where they are really, really engaging. These things, not even just myths, some of them are real concerns. If I get vaccinated, I had the period completely goes. Yes, it goes sometimes, but it comes back. It doesn't mean you're barren. I lose my sexual prowess, well, for a bit. And then, they are real concerns. They're not hypothetical. People actually do have real concerns. I saw that the Government Citizen Interaction Center was going to try and do something with the Ministry of Health.
Yes.
I hope it can reach. It's online, it's a spaces thing. It needs to move beyond that. We've been saying this for a while. We must have community engagement around this. And finally, I really hope that the government doubles down and prioritizes making sure every Ugandan who needs, especially these priority groups, can get a vaccine for free and in time. This business of giving out our vaccines to certain categories because they have certain money and they queue jump, they go before others, just unjust and unfair. It's discriminatory, but also it erodes the citizens' trust. They say, okay, those things are for those who are well off, those who have connections. And that is how the vaccination program has increasingly rolled out. We always get to hear, there was some people, they got to have them go there. Then others go to, so we have to make sure that this is done in a transparent, equitable manner. The vaccines are they're brought to spaces that are near the communities. In this case, if they are brought to schools, that's good, but the schools must be near the communities. Administered by Ministry of Health, do not outsource them to other people. Let the Ministry of Health be in charge of this.
Indeed.
To avoid the scandals we saw of giving out water and all kinds of things, which have made people stay away from them, like make sure they're administering them, and really sensitizing the teachers to make sure it is actually happening. And finally, give us real timelines on, if you're going to vaccinate kids, give us timelines and start to engage with parents. Otherwise, hinging everything on school reopening, on vaccinating teachers and kids, without taking these measures, continues to leave people really anxious.
Well, Elena Kembabasi is the program manager, Right to Health, at the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. Elena Kembabasi, Morning at NTV has expedited some investigations into this matter, and we did discover that much as vaccinations are really important for the teachers, there's also another mind-boggling issue, the issue of poverty that has riddled these teachers, right, left and center. Shouldn't we be talking about immunizing the poverty and many of the challenges that have befallen our teachers, other than the vaccinations or hand in hand with the vaccinations? Elena?
Well, I do think they go to hand in hand, because if we can actually vaccinate teachers and get schools safely reopened, then they're able to, particularly private teachers, are able to get some income, because the government teachers are still getting income at this point. But you're absolutely right that we also have to look at teachers' wealth. We have to look at, this looks at what happens to government's money, right? Yeah. Because you remember the private teachers that had been allocated a lot of money, which to date has not been seen, and there's a time when they would be cushioned. So you also absolutely have to have that conversation, because as they deal with the abrupt closures of schools that keep happening and they don't get pay, we're losing a lot of teachers that are now going to do their own thing. We already didn't have that many. So definitely they're looking through these issues, making sure they get the money that they were supposed to have gotten.
Yes.
And also if you're making the linkage with vaccination, you say, listen, vaccination can help with safer reopenings, which hopefully means we won't have to have abrupt closures. Of course, vaccination is not the only thing. There must be, real measures around the other control, wearing a mask, making sure there's proper sanitation in the schools, all of that. But you're trying to say, listen, that schools must be reopened. We also recognize that they are supporting a certain category of people. And it's not just teachers. It is support staff. People tend to forget, which is another thing. I hope vaccination is also open to all the support staff because you need them to be vaccinated.
It is open to them too.
Yes. Well, in this country they say that, but it's not. We want it explicitly said. But again, you're right. We have to really look at, has the government done enough to cushion these sectors, and it's not just teachers.
Indeed, and that is the $64,000 question. Elena Kembabazi, should we be talking about a special stimulus package for our teachers? The fact that we gave out 100,000 to vulnerable people, should we be saying we've ring-fenced 300,000 vaccine doses for the teachers? Now we are ring-fencing such and such an amount of money for the teachers so that they could alleviate the challenges that have befallen them during this pandemic, so that when we reopen, they are in the right state of mind to go back to the classes. Elena.
Yeah, I think before ring facing, they should get that money. And every Ugandan should be concerned. We can't, all that money can't be allocated. Last year, remember, there were all kinds of stories. Oh, they have to do something. Then this has to be set up. Then, this year when they brought out the proposal for 100,000, we said, yes, by all means, give it out to people. But get the teachers' money as well and give it to the teachers. That money was, like, it should be out already. Up in all kinds of administrative things. And Uganda, whenever things just get bogged down with all kinds of things, you begin to wonder, why isn't there transparency? Why aren't things moving? Someone must be eating, right? And so we must make sure that we are seeing real transparency. Why can't they come and tell us what has happened to the teachers' money? Why give money in the middle of, they gave it last year, when schools were still closed. We have had schools closed. People are missing out twice. We need to get really serious as a country. So I really think they need to double down and first of all give this money. Before ring fencing additional money, you will ring fence, it will also not reach. We need to see the money for teachers given. Teachers should be shouting about this as well and saying what is happening, because there were certain categories they were supposed to have registered all these things.
Yes.
So that when they're getting back to school, they are. Again, for me, the reason why I believe strongly money for teachers to alleviate, to cushion them, is to avoid a lot of teachers dropping out of the workforce.
Indeed.
We have to be very serious about that. And this issue is also about citizen trust, because if they don't see that they got the money for teachers, then you come and tell them to do vaccination. Why should they trust you if you can't keep your word? So those are some of the things we are saying that really have to be done to fix citizens' trust in this government, because until it's there, we are going to struggle. Even with the public health interventions that are well designed, you will struggle for people coming to do them because they will not trust you. You don't hold your word. So I hope that the policymakers, the Minister of Education can continue to follow this up, make sure teachers get their money that was promised.
Of course, Elena Kembabazi, this fight against COVID-19 has also been dampened by the fact that government doesn't have verified data, or it's not verifying data as it continues to come in. Government still believes that it has 550,000 teachers, even though we were getting reports during this COVID-19 pandemic about how some teachers had to veer off into different sectors to be able to make a living. Some had to go into border riding, others had to go to other avenues like frying chapatis and so forth. Menial jobs, yes, to be able to make ends meet. And many were making a lot of money from these jobs and were saying they might never make it back to the education system. Wouldn't it be safe to say that not all teachers will get back into the education system, even though we vaccinate and do all this stuff and reopen the schools? Not all the workforce shall be sufficient enough to actually take on our learners.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that all of them will go back. I think that the fact that this has happened twice is the challenge with these closures is there is never a clear timeline at the time of closure of when things will reopen. And then there's a sense, and I understand because the pandemic is quite unpredictable in some aspects, but there are certain things that are predictable. Right? And so if you say you're closing schools, for this amount of time, 6 weeks, you say, okay, by this time, we should be working to getting some learners in. And you have to say that at the time you're closing, because you close and the teachers have no plan. They don't know. The administrators also don't know. So of course, definitely, the people who, if you want stability and particularly certainty in this Uganda and making income, you say, you know what? Last year it happened okay. But this year, this lockdown happened in part because people squandered the time and resources that should have been used. So you would say, Miss Uganda, can I keep hoping that people won't squander resources? And you may decide, I'm done, I'm opting out. But I think that can only really be seen when the schools again reopen. And I hope they are tracking. Okay, you had this many teachers last year. How many teachers do you have this year? How many teachers will you have after lockdown, right? And it will be interesting to see if the idea of vaccinating teachers will actually stop or at least spread school such that things are more, they're less abrupt lockdowns, right? That will be, I think, if they can pull that off, it may restore some teachers' confidence. But even beyond that, if they had given the teachers their money, then they would know, okay, yes, these things happen, they are shocks, but we have a government that cares for our welfare. But the schools are closed, you even say allocating money and then they never see it. So you can't blame those teachers who say, you know what, I'll take my chances elsewhere. But I think it also underscores the importance of having strong public, and I mean government when I say public, schools.
Indeed.
Because you see, the teachers that are on the government payroll,
yes, Elena,
for them, they are not likely to drop out because, again, they are assured of their welfare, right?
Yes,
Among the school, government can also control the government schools a lot more when it comes to a lot of these SOPs. It can really double down and say this must be there and this must be there, and because it has struggled over time to regulate the private, and a lot of them cut corners, which is what we saw when we had schools were closing, where so many, the kids were sick, the schools were cutting corners, were even refusing to report because they do want to close, they do want to lose the money if they have to close for a while, you know, and then it led into this explosion. So I think it's really important that we also strongly invest in the government schools, such that if a private school gets up and closes because it's no longer profitable, which we have seen, we saw that happen last year, some of them became offices and so forth, at least we make sure that our kids are able to learn, that they are options. And we always say this, we've been saying this for a while. Education is not a good you just trade. There are areas where the market, supply and demand will not always make sense, where certain measures have to take place. And it's government's role. Government can't run away from its role to provide education. The others can come in and complement, but government must make sure that they're actually government schools and they're of good quality and they have teachers in them. So that if others are not sure and they decide to make other career ventures, you allow them, but at least we're not sitting here like we are right now, very scared like what will happen to our kids. We must have a strong public education system. It's very key.
Elena Kembabazi, let's talk about the likelihood of schools failing to implement these standard operating procedures. This is one of the challenges that befell many of the schools in the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. We did reopen, students came back, but then social distancing within the school settings was very, very hard, simply because there was no expansion policy. If there were 50 students in a class, there was never any expansions being done within the school. So the students were crammed up in small spaces. Then we did see the resurgence of the second wave and they had to come back home. So let's talk about that likelihood. The fact that schools have not expanded or built up or erected new structures to accommodate the SOPs in that regard. Might we fall back into the same debacle?
I'm so glad you brought that up. You know, we as we talk about all schools open, the government has been talking about vaccination. It hasn't actually addressed what happened the last year.
Right.
And those things have eroded also parents' confidence. Can I safely send my kid back to school? So we have to have a post-mortem done of where things went wrong last year, and we had to come back with kids who are very ill. Some of them had to be rushed to hospital immediately. And a lot of what you're saying is right. The SOPs were not implemented and getting into the why, you know, and some of these things were known. So the government, first of all, I think failed in its monitoring role, because it should have been monitoring and saying, oh, we gave these SOPs, what's happening? Why are your kids cramped up in classes? Why aren't people wearing masks? Because you're right, there are things that are left to the individual control a lot of the time, like wearing masks. But there are things that are structural things that should have been done. Ensure people are studying in well-ventilated spaces, making sure expansions are made. And of course, sometimes if it's a private institution, it's happening their bottom line. So they're not necessarily going to do those things, and they're going to cut a lot of corners. So that becomes then an issue of regulation, because you have to make sure as government that regardless of whether kids are in a government or private school, that they are safe and are able to learn. That is part of your role as government. But number two, even in the public schools, did government make sure the measures were actually put in place to allow kids to be able to social distance, for example, to think through some of these things, right? And until those issues are addressed, yes, we will have vaccination. But it will be a while before we fully vaccinate these kids. And even if we're vaccinating kids, there are some kids who may not be vaccinated, the younger classes. So, you know, you won't have schools reopen safely until you address that. And when you look at other countries, schools have actually been able to reopen because they have addressed a lot of these things around making sure there's spacing and ventilation and changing how things are done, testing, making sure there's testing when, you know, it's not this business of keeping, like what we saw happen. A lot of the schools were hiding kids, would tell them it's pneumonia, would tell them don't tell the parents, and we're not testing the kids. So being able to have regular testing. So I think government must step up on its regulatory role, even for the private institutions, and it must invest again, particularly in the public ones, to make sure that these things are actually there. We have to get serious. COVID is here. We don't seem to see an end in sight. Now I heard about the Lambda variant, which is more deadly than the Delta variant. And the Ministry of Health has indicated that the next wave is going to be worse, twice as worse.
Yes.
So while we have 2,000 cases, we're going to have about 4,000 cases a day. So as we are planning for reopening, we must know that something big is happening. And the government must get serious and address the things that went wrong the last time. And in fact, I want Parliament to demand, to say, you know what, we want a report from the Ministry of Education, your investigations of what went wrong last time. Why were our kids put in a position to get so sick?
Elena
and how are you making these are addressed?
Elena Kembabazi, we do have a confused viewer who is saying, but what is Romeo and Elena Kembabazi talking about when they call for social distancing in the wake of vaccinations on the teachers and the students? They are wondering if the teachers have been vaccinated and the learners have been vaccinated. Why should we be social distancing within the school system? Help them understand that even though you've gotten those 2 vaccine jabs, you can still get infected with the COVID-19 disease.
Yeah, for sure. And what we are seeing with the Delta variant is that it's actually increasingly happening. So it underscores the importance of all the measures being done. Ugandans who are listening, vaccination is not this 100% foolproof thing. Unfortunately, these are the times we are living in. Vaccination often prevents the severity of illness. You're less likely to end up in the ICU. Again, the vaccines work with your body as they should, and you know. And I can give you an example. Even, I mean, Andrew Shamagro has gone and spoken this. Shamagro had gotten 1 dose when he got really ill, right? And he talks a bit about this. You should watch a clip here somewhere on YouTube that I think is great from someone who has actually faced it. But we've seen it in other countries. People have also gotten 2 and still gotten sick. But it reduces the illness. It reduces again, just if you're both vaccinated, you're less likely to transmit to each other and then both get really sick. So that is why vaccination is emphasized. But you must also wear a mask and you must also wash your hands. And there must be well-ventilated spaces and distancing. And I get it can feel like, oh my God, I'm so sick of these things. The question is, do you want your kids alive?
Yes.
Do you want to be alive? So let us actually, and I think that's also the viewers' questions and the fact that I have to educate.
Yes.
Also underscore that the Ministry of Health should be doing a lot more, and we have been saying this for a while, to talk to people beyond PR of get vaccines, to actually sit there and address their concerns. Because this viewers' concern, I'm so glad they raised it, is a very important concern.
Here is another concern, Elena. Here is another concern. The viewer is concerned that maybe we could have our learners, you know, learning under trees, because what am I talking about, Elena Kembabazi? Most of the private schools were sold off. You saw what happened and took center stage during this COVID-19 pandemic. So the experts are saying, and the viewer also who has been watching all these stories coming through on the news, that yes, if these schools have been sold off, where are the teachers going to be teaching these learners from? Under the trees?
That's a good question that I'm sure that when the data comes in, because again, we've seen this happening, but of course we have to see it practically when schools are reopening as well. But the Ministry of Education actually should be planning. These are some of the things they should address us on the next time. But for us, it also underscores the importance of a strong public government education system. Because even if the schools got whatever sold off, the government should be able to absorb the teachers. We are short of teacher. Our teacher-to-pupil ratios have always been dismal in this country, particularly in government schools. So the government should be able to say, in fact, by now they should be trying to, in terms of trying to have smaller classes, they should be actually, among other things, trying to recruit more teachers, such that you have smaller class sizes instead of the big thing with one teacher, particularly in the rural areas where you even sometimes have, like in one building, there are 2 classes learning. It was just very chaotic. Isa has a couple of reports you should read about the failures in our education system. So I think government should be able to absorb those. And again, for me, like I said, it just shows you cannot control individual actions. If someone says, even if they say, I used to make this money from this and I can't, I'm out, you should be ready for that. But what is more important is this government should recognize we're not supposed to rely on outsiders. They only complement. Education is not supposed to be a good. If you leave it to be a good, it is affected by market forces of supply and demand, like we're seeing now. When it's no longer profitable, then you won't have the schools, some of these private institutions. So the government must double down and get serious about making sure we have strong government schools, enough teachers in them, absorb the ones who may need jobs. It's even better for their job security, and make sure that you equip these schools, they have the basics. And we begin to go back to what we saw. A lot of our parents' generation came up from very strong government schools. They got good education. But in our generation, we've seen commercialization of education that has reached a point where everyone thinks I have to go to this. It's the government sort of stepped back. So we want to see it step up again.
Elena Kembabazi, Program Manager, Right to Health at the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. Many thanks for actually making time to speak to us right here in Morning at NTV. There's quite a lot that could have exhausted. We'll actually look for you some other time so that we engage you more on this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and it's good to be here.
Indeed.
Have a great morning.
Always a pleasure. And you're still watching Morning at NTV.